What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here, once again with JaboctheGreat. We are back with the last word. As the title suggests, the big topic this week, of course, is Aaron Rodgers going down with an Achilles injury in his Monday Night Football debut with the Jets against the Bills. Aaron is going to be out for the season, unfortunately, but despite that, the Jets were able to win this game against the Bills with Zach Wilson coming in to relieve Aaron after his injury as the Jets won in overtime.
Yeah, despite the talent on this Jets team, it's kind of a little worrisome when you see Zach Wilson come in. We know that he's not like the worst quarterback ever, but against the Bills, especially on an opening night, it's kind of a scary thing as a Jets fan or as anybody, I guess, to see Zach Wilson come in to relieve Aaron Rodgers and lead your team. But they get it done, and it's not that Zach Wilson had like the most amazing game of his life, but he did play well enough to get his team to a victory against a pretty good Bills team. And we'll talk about some of the issues that the Bills have on their own in losing this game. But yeah. On the stat sheet, Zach Wilson goes 14 for 21, 140 yards. There's one touchdown and one interception. Pretty decent game, nothing overwhelmingly horrible. Breece Hall comes back from his injury. Clearly looked a little rusty on some of his runs, but he does go for 10 carries with 127 yards, including a lot of that coming from an 83-yard run. This one could have maybe made it to the house. He was definitely a little gassed on the run, probably because of coming back from the injury, but also Garrett Wilson, if you see the clip, starts celebrating next to him when there's a guy right next to him to block, and that guy ends up tackling Breece Hall. So maybe he could have had a little extra help from his teammates on that run. Still impressive nonetheless. Dalvin Cook is with the Jets now, not as impressive as Breece Hall. 13 carries, 33 yards. Not a horrible game for when he was being used, but it's a little less than what we might expect for Dalvin Cook. Did outpace Breece Hall in carries, though, which is interesting. Alan Lazard led in the air with 2 receptions for 46 yards. Garrett Wilson had 34 yards on 5 receptions, and he had a pretty crazy touchdown. The way he pulled it in was insane. Just a really talented receiver there. And of course, Lazard already making his splash on the Jets. Quinnen Williams recovered a Josh Allen fumble, and then Jordan Whitehead picked off Josh Allen 3 times. Same guy, 3 interceptions on Josh. Just a crazy game. One of them wasn't like the most horrible thing. It was essentially a punt. We'll get into more of that later on, but it's still, that's insane. I think Xavier Gibson sends the Bills packing with a 65-yard punt return touchdown in overtime. He was, I believe, an undrafted rookie, just added from the practice squad a few days ago, a few days before the game, and came in and made his splash right at the end. So for the Bills, man, Josh Allen, 29 for 41, 236 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. That's not good. That's by all means a pretty rough game. 36 rushing yards. And one of his runs, he was running, he was like 6 yards away from the first down line, and he jumped in the air to try to get past another defender. We talked about this before about Josh Allen doing kind of dumb things where especially when he's running for his body, that's got to be up there. He wasn't making it. There's no need to dive. He's not that tall. He's not 8 feet tall. He was going to get 6 more yards by jumping through a defender. So I just don't get it. Anyway, James Cook led the team in rushing, 13 carries for 46 yards. Not super impressive. He did look pretty useful in the game. He was pretty good in the air, about 17 yards, I think. But it's not the most like eye-catching stat line. Stephon Diggs led in the air with 102 yards and got Josh's only touchdown. I think the Bills' only touchdown, and it was kind of not much else going on for the receivers in this game for the Bills. And then on top of the 3 interceptions, Josh fumbled twice, being able to recover one of them. But of course, as I said, Quinnen Williams got the other one. Matt Milano picked off Zach Wilson. That couldn't even be a positive in its own, as he got flagged right after for taunting because he started like shouting at the dude on the ground, the receiver. Yep. So that didn't work out the best for them. And then Tyler Bass we don't do a whole lot of kicker things here on the show. They kind of just do their job. But Tyler Bass definitely fought for his life in this game, nailing all the field goals when he was asked to, including dunking in a 50-yard field goal. I mean, when you heard the ball hit the post, I'm thinking, oh, they're cooked. They're not going to overtime. But it actually bounces in, and they make it overtime. Unfortunately, Tyler Bass couldn't do anything then. He just kind of had to watch his team die. But he did do his part and keeping them alive throughout the game and getting them into overtime. So good game for him. Not the best game for Josh Allen.
Yeah, you mentioned it. That first interception he threw was basically a punt, but it was still insanely stupid. And watching the game, I said, "What in the heck are you doing, man?" They showed the graphic at the start of the game or right before the game, showing how many touchdowns that he had. It was like the most in the first 5 years for a quarterback. So that was impressive. Then they immediately showed that he had the most interceptions for the first 5 years for a quarterback. And I didn't realize he threw that much. I knew like his first year, obviously wasn't as amazing. And then last year, we spent a lot of time talking about interceptions last year, especially in that little stretch where he had a bunch back to back to back. I didn't realize he had thrown that much. And that first one, I was just like, okay, that's insanely stupid. Just don't do that again. It didn't really kill him. It was basically a punt, like you said. The other two interceptions were still bad. I mean, one again was just horrible, and then that last one is in the coverage. I mean, I don't really have no idea what Josh Allen is thinking sometimes. Great quarterback, great passer, but all interceptions are not equal, and those interceptions were horrible. I mean, those are bad, and the fumble as well too. They were able to get a field goal anyway, which they looked pretty good on that last drive to tie it up and send it into overtime. But that fumble could have killed them because if the Jets were able to actually run the clock out, because they only moved 15 yards over 3 minutes, if they were able to actually run the clock out and get somewhere, because that last play, the 3rd and 12, I think, they just pretty much ran it just so they can get something and then kick the field goal. If the Jets were able to run it out, you'd have to put the game on Josh Allen at that point. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast. You can't put an entire game on one player. Quarterbacks definitely, we hear this all the time. They get too much credit, too much blame. But 3 interceptions and then a fumble when you could have drove down and got something, ran the clock out yourself and got a win, that would have been rough. But it didn't hurt them there as they were still able to get a field goal. But yeah, the turnovers is just inexcusable for a quarterback of his caliber. And it's really weird that, again, we're talking about him making just boneheaded, stupid plays and not about him making great plays, because he had a 250-yard game, but not really impressive when you have all those interceptions. And the other fumble that he didn't recover, um, besides the one that he did. So, yeah, not the greatest game for Josh Allen. To Zach Wilson, though, I remember Robert Sala's face when he kind of came in. Maybe that was just his face of shock, obviously when Aaron goes down. And I knew as soon as I saw him limping. Then when he came back down and sat down, I was like, yeah, I think something's probably very wrong here. And obviously, unfortunately, that is the case. But I think it was probably just shock. I don't think he like hates Zach Wilson. Um, but I think it was more just like, okay, shoot, now we gotta like what the heck we gotta do here. We've been the whole thing this all season is obviously Aaron Rodgers is gonna be, I don't want to say the savior for this team, but you bring in a Hall of Fame quarterback with this much talent on offense, you bring in some guys in, you bring in some guys on the other side. The defense is already really good. This should be a good team this year. And a team led by Aaron, besides last year, for the most part, you're going to get at least 10 wins out of them. So the Jets obviously had high hopes, probably higher hopes than that. So for that to go down in flames in just an instant like that seemed rough. But Zach Wilson, he had that interception pretty early on when he came in, but for the most part, he didn't do anything stupid. Didn't wasn't forcing it too far deep or anything like that, but he just stayed composed for the most part. Just didn't make any bad decisions outside that pick. And that Jets defense, that's really what's going to have to be the driving force for him this season. I'm not saying Zach Wilson can't be good. I think he'll have to be better than what he was, the past 2 years. But the defense is definitely going to be the driving force for this team.
Yeah, and I mean, there's four names on this defense that are just kind of like that were crazy in this game. Obviously, Sauce Gardner is a player that we know is going to make some big plays. Just his presence on the field definitely helped out Jordan Whitehead in being able to get in the right space for some of those interceptions, or for all of those interceptions. I think it was pretty much doubled each time. Again, the first one he just launched it down the field and it was a punt, but still, the double pressure helps. And then Quincy Williams did a lot, breaking to the line, getting to the running back, especially getting to James Cook a few times, and having a big impact. I think Quinnen Williams, not to be confused with Quincy Williams, same team, had a lot of mental pressure. I think on Josh Allen. He never actually got a sack, but he kept getting through the line and getting really close to Josh. And on some of those picks, it was Quinnen Williams who had busted through and gotten right there as Josh went to throw, and it would end up being a pick. So just a big impact on the front part of that defense, and running around chasing the receivers. Just some really good double faceted impact there. Now some of that could just be that Josh has a tendency for picks anyway, right? And so Quinton Williams doesn't have to necessarily get to him; he just has to like get at his head. And I mean, if I was a quarterback and Quinton Williams was running at me, I wouldn't be excited either. I'd want to get the ball out of my hand. Um, so just a really good game for all four of those guys, especially Quincy Williams. There was a point in the game where I kept hearing Quinton and Quincy when I was watching, sometimes idly watching, and I was like, wait, huh? And so I started to focus a little more. But both of them did really well. Sauce Gardner and Jordan Whitehead, of course, did really well. Bills defense, not terrible performance for them. They played decently enough. I mean, they held the Jets to only that one touchdown, and otherwise it was just getting them into field goal range. Same time for both teams. There was a field goal battle, except for the touchdowns in overtime or in the regular. I just forgot what the word is in regulation. And then of course the last touchdown in overtime comes from the Jets on the punt return. So both defenses played really well. The Jets are going to need their defense to maybe step up a little more. Their running game looks poised to be decent if they can get Brees Hall back to full health and have Dalvin Cook kind of get a little more comfortable in that role, and let Zach Wilson get a little more comfortable with throwing. Again, 14 for 21, 140 yards. Didn't do anything stupid. Played the game very well. Handed the ball off a lot in the 23 carries to Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook. But I think the Jets, it's not time to panic. It definitely sucks. We've heard this. We've built up Aaron Rodgers all season. We've been ready to see Aaron Rodgers work with this talented core on the Jets offense, and it's not going to come to fruition this year. I hope that he can recover and get to play out. I'd hate to see him go out like this. But yeah, a good gritty game. Not what I expected. I didn't really expect the Jets to win with Aaron. So switching Aaron to Zach Wilson, I wouldn't have expected them to pull out the win. But shout out to Robert Saleh and his defense really for pulling off such a gritty win. And I mean the Jets offense played well when they needed to. So good game. It was a nice Monday Night Football. I hope that we can get without the injury. I hope that we can still have more exciting Monday Night Footballs. We talked last season a lot about the tendency of the primetime games to not be so great.
Yeah, and obviously now the league pretty much did what they did last year with Denver and scheduled a lot of primetime games, but I think everybody kind of figured the Jets would be better. Now Zach Wilson, I think this is kind of like last year with Cooper Rush, in over in Dallas. How we looked at it. Defense just has to play well, which they should. Running game, you got two good running backs. Dalvin Cook can be exceptional, and Brees Hall definitely can be explosive. I mean, we saw on that run there, obviously. So they got the tools. I think now you just kind of have to, again, for Robert Saleh, you just have to say, all right, we came into the season with Aaron expecting to be able to do this. Zach Wilson. Even if Zach Wilson is twice as good as he was last year, it's not Aaron Rodgers at his best. So you kind of just, I mean, these coaches are smart. You kind of have to just frame the game around how play to Zach Wilson's strengths and don't get into a situation where, okay, Zach Wilson's going to have to beat you. I think he has the capability to say, okay, he has some drives where I can pull it out and go win a game, but that's not the game that they want to play. That's the game that they could play if they had Aaron. With Zach Wilson, probably not. So get the running backs going, get that defense going, consistently getting pressure. And Zach Wilson, just make him play within himself. Don't do anything stupid again. And I think the Jets, obviously their ceiling is not as high, but I think they can still make the playoffs. It'll just probably be a lower seed. We still had them a little bit, lower anyway, just because we really didn't know what the team would do. So if they do still to make the playoffs, I think it's possible it'll probably be a much lower seed, for sure. You might be surprised. They might somehow do exceptionally well, but yeah, I think it's just going to be more of a controlled kind of game like this was. Limit the turnovers from Zach, run the ball, and play great defense. That should be the formula going forward.